No, bro. It's funny. Welcome in, guys. Welcome in. That is hilarious. Welcome in, guys. What a day. What a day. Pretty nice day that we had. Spy. Where are we going here, Spy? Where are we headed to? Just a little bleed out that we had. How did Apple actually do today? Let me take a peep at Apple. Well, nice little wedge action, little megaphone going on. Let's take a peep at Microsoft. Actually, I can just let me look at Mega Cap Tech off the right here. Jeez. Alright, it wasn't as bad as I expected. Amazon did somewhat decently. Wasn't as bad as I expected. Well, welcome in, guys. Welcome in. What's going on, 14 Hobby? Ticket request? Well, today's just one of those days where we see the controlled downtrend that we had in the overall market today. So I figured today would just be a good day where instead of actually telling you some names that I'm specifically looking at, because we are going to wait to see what Jerome Powell is really going to be saying tomorrow once he starts to testify. I think it's pretty much better off that I look at some levels in which names that you guys pretty much have. Maybe you're holding a position on, and maybe that benefits you guys a little bit better in terms of giving you some ideas of what you're potentially holding and giving you the levels of what I'm pretty much would be watching for on those names specifically. All right, but I guess without further ado, let me jump into some of the names that you guys are watching and maybe take a look at some of these names, see what we're looking at in terms of these. And wow, what a move by Vale. This one definitely went under the radar for me. This is quite the name, I will say. Looks like we do have a nice little gap fill here. I will say that that actually is the first thing that does stand out to me. So a nice little gap fill in terms of here. Highlight the little green here. It's a nice little gap fill you have going on. We also did have a gap fill which we did already complete, so that's just to be noted as potential support if you get a pullback. So I would notate that. I do like the rounding bottom action that you have going on. I do want to see is this potentially, and yeah, this is actually something that does stand out to me. This actually looks as though you are making a cup and handle, in which case this actually just formed the resistance for your cup. So if you notice, here's the resistance from previously from the end of August, and this ends up hitting right into the resistance that we ended up having, and that actually smacked right into it from today. So I do like that. Now, what I would potentially look at is looking at for this previous gap to retrace off of today's move. So you'll retrace, look to see if we end up holding that prior gap fill right around 1834, 1835. We're going to look to see if we end up holding. Otherwise, if we come back down even further, I would look to hold right here, in which this seems to be what was prior resistance. We see the body of the candle holding pretty much here, and also the body hitting right here on this candle as well. So I like this level in which that's pretty much sitting almost, you could say, near 18 flat at 1790 will be that level in which I would look to see if we end up forming some type of handle, and then we get a nice little push right out of that in which we'll hit into our next resistance. So I would say a nice little potential move like this in which we get a nice curl right back up to the upside here. So if you were in this position right now, this would be the ideal spot where I would take my profits, wait for the pullback towards this high 17 mark, and then that'll be when I re-enter to go long, and then we end up filling this gap. And I did see, just notice also another gap here at the top, a very small tiny gap as well up here, in which that also hits right into the resistance of where that arrow is pretty much sitting at. So you'll hit another gap fill here that completes right around 2150 as well. So I like this name in particular quite a bit, but I would expect to get another retracement here off of this little cup and handle. And I'll look to see if we end up holding here at this $18 mark, or if we get a bigger retracement off of this handle. Now, if I was to look at the 50% retracement, let's see if that ends up actually looking to be the case. See if we get a 50% retracement off of this. If we were to get a 50% retracement, we're potentially looking at all the way down towards 15.5 will be where we're going to be looking at a 50% retracement if this handle wanted to retrace the complete 50%. All right. So otherwise, you could potentially also be sitting at a 3.82 retracement, and that's at 16.5. So those are other levels to keep in mind if we don't end up particularly holding at this particular resistance at that 18 mark. All right. So that's what I'll be looking at this one, but definitely a phenomenal chart. If you're holding shares, I wouldn't necessarily be bothered by the retracement off of the handle. I would continue to hold. But if you're in options, then yeah, I would say that you want to take your profits. Don't try to get caught in the pullback to kill your premium, and just wait for that pullback to re-enter at that 18 mark, and then go long on it again. All right, to fill both of those gap fills at the top. So that's, I do like this setup. I think the veil was definitely one that under the radar for me. I saw the flow coming through the tape, but that's definitely a nice one that you caught there, 14. All right. Someone also mentioned NUE. Let's take a look at NUE. NUE. What are we looking at here? So let's see if we have our first R resistance. And maybe the line chart might actually tell us a little bit of a different story. Actually, it does tell us a little bit more of a different story here. See the line chart, see where particular resistance actually sits off of the line chart here. Go back into my candles. All right, so it sits right into the bodies, and it actually touches this wick. So I do like that spot. You do see that it's pretty much in a full breakout mode right now. So I do like that in particular. I do want to actually stretch out the chart. Let's see if there's any prior resistance points before. Let's see if we go to the monthly, if there's anything, or if this is actually fresh new highs. Yes, it is fresh new highs. So that is something that's good to be caught on the eye here. Now, the other thing I do want to see is if there's any resistance points that line up here. That's another thing that I particularly like to do, is look at the resistance point to see if there's any kind of resistance point that lines up in particular. And so that's what I'm also going to do here. See if there's a resistance that I like in particular here that stands out. Probably maybe the weekly gives me a better idea of the resistance that we're looking at. Let's see if there's any resistance I like in particular that stands out here. All right, so I do like this in terms of this resistance right about here, right into the body of that candle. So if I were to say we're gonna hit some potential resistance as we see how many green candles, weekly green candles we have, we're gonna hit into some resistance right here, right around this 146 mark will be where you're gonna end up hitting resistance. And that's what I would potentially be looking at towards your resistance. So if you're looking at calls, I would target this out towards 146. Give yourself quite a bit of time here. At least I want to say about 3 weeks or so. I would give yourself ample amount of time on this one. But 146 would be my target off of this. Looking at this overhead resistance before you get a decent sized pullback. And the other thing to take in consideration is that once you do end up hitting this 146 mark, you're likely going to get a retest here from this breakout point. So your breakout point was initially basically 122 half. You're going to get a retracement back down towards that resistance line, in which you can end up potentially retracing back down towards 121 to 120, depending how rapid that ends up hitting to the downside. So 146 would be my upside target. Retracement towards the breakout point will be 120 to 121. But again, if you're trying to play this right into the resistance, get yourself some ample time, about 3 weeks out at the very minimum, and play this right into that 147 mark, the 146 mark. But I do like this. You do see it's pretty much in a full breakout mode. So it's a beautiful move to the upside here. We know how energy has pretty much just been on steamrolling. I know that Avery was actually watching DVN today. So that was just a beautiful one, but I expect continuation. I would just target the 146 as a potential resistance, profit taking spot before you get a nice little retracement out of the breakout point. All right. So that's pretty much what I would say. Pretty much as you see here as well. Maybe if you zoom in as well, if you see you had a nice little breakout point here as well. If I draw a line across, you see how you got a nice little breakout point in which you ended up hitting right into your resistance. You pulled back and you basically retested the breakout point. That's exactly the same scenario in which I'm looking at potentially here. Hit into the resistance point right around 146 and you retest the breakout point before continuation potentially to the upside. All right. So again, 146 upside, downside potential for the retest is 120 to 121 to re-enter and go back long again. All right. But I do like that chart. Definitely like that setup as well. All right. Next one was MTTR. take a look, and yo, this is, I gotta say, this is definitely an ugly chart. I have to admit that. And I pretty much, one of my biggest pet peeves is that I usually try to stay away from stocks that have just basically a never-ending downtrend, and that's basically what I see off of this name. See if we draw this out in a few different ways. Potentially looking at this in terms of this break of the downtrend, potentially, in which is a very slight potential in which this is actually already broken downtrend. I do see it's trying to fill this gap, which has actually already completed. So I do see that we've completed the gap. So a little bit more of a pause to concern to see if we're going to get more continuation out of this gap fill. The other thing that catches my attention is the resistance sitting right here at this level of basically 976 is where you're going to head into resistance. So if we do get any kind of continuation out of this name, that's where I would expect to hit our resistance right around that 976 mark, in which hopefully you get beautiful little continuation after the completion of the gap, hit the 976 resistance, and then we get a nice little retracement in which I can see some support or what was prior distribution right around this level right here. So this may end up acting as a potential support once you end up hitting that 976 mark. You retrace back down to 850 half, basically $8 a half, and then you get a continuation back towards the upside. And you also do have a nice little gap fill here as well. It's sitting small, tiny little gap fill here, right at this mark, pretty much right up towards 1120 is where you're sitting at a nice little gap fill. All right. So I do like this one. I'm not a fan of pretty much the names that have just broken the downtrend. It just feels very weak at this point in time. I do need to see a little bit more. So I'm not too comfortable in sitting in a position like this one just yet. But I would take a shot. If it ends up breaking over this level, over that 8.5, then I will take that right up. Probably get a nice little dollar and change move, $1.50 move out of that, and potentially target towards that upper gap fill at 1120. All right, and that's how I would pretty much approach this one. But I like the setup here now in particular. If you would have told me that before it broke the downtrend resistance, I would have said to stay clear of it. But I don't mind the risk reward potentially at this current spot, filling the gap. But you definitely want a continuation out of this gap fill that it just completed. All right. Let me take a look. The other one you mentioned was OLED. I have not looked at OLED in ages, actually. This one's definitely one I have not looked at in quite a while. See if there's anything that stands out on this one in particular. Probably going straight up for the bodies on this one, not towards the wick. So let's see if we get realign this here. All right, so I do like this one. One of the biggest things here, as you see, is that you still have a defined downtrend resistance. What I typically say that is that you usually want to wait for the downtrend resistance to break. So until I actually end up seeing this one get a move over 162, I would particularly stand clear. And the reason why I say 162 in particular, if I actually show you why, see if I get a line drawn across, in which I'll pretty much put that as red, pretty much signifying, well, red is a little too blend in it. But as you see, this level of resistance I pretty much just spot on hit there on this green line. It acted as a prior support. It acted as a nice little wick before a breakdown. It also acted as a little bit of a support to resistance area here as well before another breakdown. So to me, it's actually served as a point of breakdown pretty much consistently, other than the first initial time that it ended up hitting this line. Breakdown back in November, breakdown again in July, and so I'll be looking to see if we end up hitting this spot again at that 162. Do we get a breakdown here at this 162 yet again, in which it pretty much tries to extend this downtrend? Or do we end up breaking the 162 and then that's when we get a full-on breakout? But that 162 right here would be that pretty much that key mental level that I'll be watching, in which I actually take that back. It's 165. I was saying 162 for this whole time. It's 165 is that actual key level that I'm watching. So 165 is that level. If it breaks that 165 level, I will tell you to go long. If it can't get over that 165, then for me personally, I would stay short on this name or stay sideline until we get a better price action out of it. Especially during these market conditions, I wouldn't want you to get caught on that. If you were trying to maybe just get a quick dollar for the buck here or whatever the case may be, then maybe you target it right into the resistance. from this current spot, you put a stop loss here, in which I see some nice little wick bottoms here, in which we try to double bottom off of this, right around this 152.30 level. Maybe you try to anchor that as your stop loss, the 152.30 level, and then you take this right into the resistance. So you'll hit the downtrend resistance here at 161, and the rejection level that I'll be watching for is a 165, with my stop loss pretty much sitting here at this 150, 152.20 level. All right, and that's how I would potentially look to play it if you're looking for just a quick short-term play off of that one. But if you're trying to go long-term on this, I would wait for the break over the 165 to get a better confirmation on that one. All right, but definitely a nice looking chart for right now. Definitely want to monitor. I do like OLED. I think the only concern with OLED is the liquidity. So that's something I would definitely also caution you about. So make sure you check out with the liquidity before you really try to make a move on that one. All right. Someone said Blink. I know that Tom's actually been in Blink. I know that he's been watching Blink for quite a while. So I'm not too much going to really coincide with what he's looked at, for all this time. It does still look like a pretty much a valid inverted head and shoulders. So I will say that. Why did I move that up? It still looks like a valid inverted head and shoulders. You have this inverted left shoulder, inverted head, and inverted right shoulder. And why does that keep moving? All right, let me just shorten it. All right, there we go. So pretty much a complete inverted head and shoulders action is going on. You still rejected the neckline here on the completion of this right shoulder, potentially, that it looked like. So I would look to see if it ends up holding right down here around 2370. I want to see it hold that level and retest the neckline and get a full on breakout. If it can't get over that neckline, then that's pretty much where it's going to spell trouble for you. So you want to see it break over this 2565 level to break that neckline. Otherwise, then you're going to get and likely end up getting a rejection, and it's going to be a failed pattern is what I will be looking at. All right. So that's pretty much what I'm looking at. In terms of targets, if I were to really tell you where my overhead resistance is lying, it will be right at the spot right here. So if you see, you have the wicks, the body's pretty much all aligned at this resistance point of 29.15 is what I would be sitting at as your overhead resistance. Supply zone would pretty much start though at that 28.5 level. So 28.5 to that mark of 29.16 would be your supply level in which you would expect to get some sellers in here, retest the neckline, and that's once you get the breakout. I'm saying if you get the breakout. You get the breakout, you go into the supply, you retest the neckline here at that 26, that 25 half mark, and then hopefully get a continuation at that point. All right. But in terms of this right now, this structure, you got the rejection right now. So you want to see it end up holding here down at the bottom around that low 23 mark, retest the neckline, and then get a breakout. All right. But I do think that Tom is still holding it. The pattern is still there for the take. But you're just watching for have a stop loss in place is what I would basically say. All right, that's pretty much the biggest thing, and knowing where your breakout point is, which I pretty much identified there for you, as that high 25 mark. All right. I'm gonna look at three more names real quick, and then we'll likely call it an afternoon here for you guys. Let's see. Someone also mentioned PayPal. I have not looked at PayPal either in a while. Actually, PayPal actually might look interesting here. I will say that. I haven't looked at this one in a while, but the name actually starts to look quite interesting, I will say, at this point, at this juncture. So what this pretty much tells me, and let me just drop the line, the resistance line in green so you get a better image. So here's what I like about this one. You had a nice little descending, broadening wedge type action. As I draw pretty much your support level. You had a beautiful little descending broadening wedge action. You had the clean little breakout in which we basically saw off of sympathy from Square when they had their earnings, if you guys remember that. You had the beautiful breakout. You're having a retest of this downtrend break that you ended up getting. And so this is what I would end up expecting to happen is that we're going to be able to hold this 105 half mark and we're going to get a beautiful continuation back to the upside. And that's what my anticipation will be at this point. All right. So we hold the 105 half, we get a beautiful continuation. Now it's a matter of finding out, all right, where it's going to be our potential supply zone in which we would expect sellers to basically step in and start to take profits. It will be right around this mark is where I would expect that to take place. So as you see, pretty much the body's mostly aligned here, in which we've actually acted as support or resistance at this level. And that would be right around 119 half is what I'll be looking at. So we hold this 105 half. I would see us start to make a move towards that 119 level. And that'll be where your overall supply zone is sitting as that 119 level. And that'll be where you end up likely taking your profit. So I like this one. I think at this point in time is where you could potentially go long on this one. Granted, the fact that you do want to scale in, primarily I say that because of market volatility, and that's why I would caution about that. And keyword scale in, that is the keyword, right? But I like the spot that PayPal is already sitting at right now. I like the beautiful pattern that we have. Beautiful break of the descending broadening wedge. Beautiful retest of this 105 mark. And then I want to see that push right into that 119 level to get a nice little breakout here on the continuation. All right. So this is pretty much for me right now. This would be a textbook setup. This is one of those plays where I wouldn't mind trying to scale in on this one by the end of the week here, and then just look to add on my position as we see this market volatility just continuing through this week here. All right. But again, keyword scale in. You want to see it hold the 105 half mark off of the support retest basically, and then we'll target 119 off of this one. So it's a good candidate for shares, for leaps, and also a short-term play holding that 105 half mark. All right, that's definitely a good one. I like that one. That was a really good pickup there, Adrian. Like that one. Let me see. Someone mentioned UUU. Sounds like I believe Dapper was actually looking at this ticker, if I'm not mistaken. I think this is the one that he was going off of. But we know how energy's been, so I like this one. I do see that you said that you're currently in it. You want to know when is a good time to take profits. So basically what we're going to be looking for here is our supply zone. Where are we going to see profit takers start to step in? And so if we start to identify that, I'm looking right around this level right here. See if it's up or down. I think we're going to sit right around here. Yep. This will be where I would potentially look to see where sellers start to step in or profit taking starts to step in. That's ideally what I would look at. And I just want to outline this for the downtrend break. That was a very clean downtrend break. If you would have caught this one down here at that low $7 mark, that was a textbook breakout that you ended up having. So I like this one very much. That was definitely a good one on your part, Sut Life. If you caught this one down exactly at the downtrend break at that $7 mark, beautiful textbook play. But I would look to end up seeing profit takers step in here right around close enough to that $9 mark. I want to say specifically 990 would be that level in which you're particularly looking at. So 990 up towards 906 would be my supply zone in which we could see some profit takers start to step in, and we potentially start to see a little bit of a retracement before a continuation. All right, so that's what I potentially would tell you there on this one. If I were looking to see a potential support level in which we could end up retracing, it would be right here at this level. So if you end up potentially getting that move straight up towards that 906 mark, look for your retracement back down to the low $8 mark, and then look to re-enter at that spot for your potential next risk reward, basically, right? Because I say risk reward because that may not end up being the full retracement, but that would be where you potentially want to start to scale in and have your stop loss. Because of course, the other caution part about that is that you do not want to get caught in this gap fill towards the downside. All right. So that's something that you definitely do not want to get caught in. If I pretty much just highlighted gray, you see where that gap fill is sitting at. So 906 is where I would tell you that your pretty much your top end target is. You look to take your profits there, wait to retrace back to the low $8 mark, re-enter, and then have a defined stop loss so you're not caught in that gap fill down below. All right, but that's definitely a good play on your part as well. So I like the tickers you guys are hitting me with. Two more real quick, and then we will call it an evening here, guys. Someone said Oxy. I do like this one. I believe it was Tom that was mentioning this one on live, if I'm not mistaken. I believe it was Tom. I could be wrong. But if I look at the line chart, looking to see where our resistance, where our breakout points are, I do like this spot right here. In terms of our breakout, we see pretty much a very defined level. I do like this one. We see the breakout. We saw the nice little breakout off of this. A nice little retest. As you see, the line chart pretty much gives you a very much more defined level of this. So I like this one. The only thing that cautions me about this one right now as I go back into the candles is that you are particularly looking to sit into supply zone right here. And that's the part that I would caution about. So that's the only thing that I don't particularly like, is because this actually served previously as a support level. It served as a prior peak on multiple occasions here, on two different occasions. So this is my only caution, in which is, if I was pretty much looking at this, this would be my particularly my supply zone in which I'm looking at to take profits on Oxy. So if I were to tell you right now, I would tell you tomorrow to likely lock in profits on Oxy, rather than to continue to maybe quote unquote diamond hold this. I would look to lock in my profits and look for a retracement. As you see, you literally just went vertical from this low $40 mark straight up to $46. That was literally just a $6 vertical move that you got out of Oxy. So I would particularly look to get into profit, into locking in my profits. And if I can get a retracement back down to this lower level here, this will likely be where I would potentially tell you to look to re-enter if we get any kind of meaningful retracement out of this, in which you get in right here towards that low $43 mark. You get about a $3 retracement, and you look to re-enter. And that actually includes pretty much the gap fill, if you see, and probably would help if I go off the daily to expand it. You pretty much see this little gap fill here that I also included off of this retracement that I'm potentially looking at, right? You see this little gap fill here sitting at that $44 mark. Look to see it retrace back down to the low $43 mark, and then that'll be where I potentially tell you to go long and retest that supply zone and get a full-on breakout, in which you also have another gap fill sitting here at the top as well. All right, so another gap fill here sitting right around that $50 mark is what I would potentially be looking at of getting in on the pullback from that $43 mark. And that's how I would particularly look to play this. Lock in my profits right now if you are holding a position, get a retracement down to the low $43 mark, and then get a retest into the supply, and then continuation into the upper gap fill here at that $50 mark. And that's what I would potentially look at. All right. It's not a spot where I would go looking to chase here right now after just a $6 vertical price action. All right. And that's basically what I would be looking at here with Oxy. All right. Last ticker I'm going to look at here. Someone just mentioned AVGO. I'm going to look at one of those, my guy. And then we'll likely call it here for the afternoon, as I look through quite a bit of charts here. This is quite an odd one, a little bit of a head scratcher. I know that I was actually looking at AMD. I was holding some AMD calls, rather, was it from last night? I was looking to see if there's going to be any strength holding over that 122 mark on AMD. Wasn't the case. We see the chip names pretty much took quite the nosedive across the board. AMD, Nvidia, Broadcom. I probably sure you can throw in Intel and Micron in that same breath as well, because I'm pretty sure they all took the same heat just looking at three of those names. But granted, the fact that you say that this one actually has earnings coming up, and if I try to dial in more so on a smaller time frame here, and maybe just look at the line chart, see if there's anything defined. If I were to pretty much give you a defined little wedge action that's going on here, and I definitely want to change the color of this wicks, and I'll likely try to get into a smaller time frame here. You do have a nice little wedge action, which is basically building in for that breakout or breakdown from earnings, but it's not particularly too healthy, is what I would say, in which you're trying to go long on. And that's where I need to see how the broader sector actually performs going into tomorrow to really see that you're going to get a run up on AVGO into their earnings. Because following today's price action, I'm not too confident on any of these little chip names, any of the basically the semiconductors, for a better term, to say that I'm confident in getting an earnings run up on Broadcom here. But your near-term support here, I would be looking at is towards 559. So that does kind of smell like about another $10, $11 move to the downside here. With this volatility in the market continuing, you could see another $11 move down to the downside. If you were really trying to get frisky and you're trying to really get a push into an earnings run up, 560, 559 would be where I start to scale in to maybe get into a nice little day trade as that holding support. Otherwise, if you get shaken out here, I'm looking to hold your support. Ideally, you want to have a stop loss, but if you're looking to really just have an anchored spot of knowing where to get out, 555 would be that spot. So you get in 559, 560, try to scale into maybe a day trade. I would particularly say if you're saying earnings are coming up, and 555 would be my stop loss in terms of that play. All right, unless you have a percentage of a stop loss in your mind. All right, but not particularly healthy in terms of the broader sector, and that's why I say this is a little bit more of one where I wouldn't want to catch a knife, just because of how weak the broader sector looks, and I would not want to be involved in that. All right. But other than that, I hope some of those names I just went through kind of give you a better idea. Exactly, pretty much more the mental aspect, how I would be looking at it, supply zones, resistance, supports, some names that I want to stay away from in terms of what we're looking at in the broader sector. But I want to say that, I mean, overall, the market conditions do not look ideal. I know that Avery pretty much put up his SPY chart just to wrap things up, guys. If I pretty much go down to the 2 hour, this is very much a controlled downtrend right now. As you see, there's not really much panic in this type of environment right now, despite how much we're going down and how quickly we're going down, it feels. But we did bounce right off of support. We saw the nice sporadic move we had to the upside into the close. Um, and so I'm going to look to see if we get any kind of continuation out of that. Maybe we get some kind of meaningful push overnight here. Uh, Push us right into resistance into that high upper 433 mark. And then we get another leg down as we try to set lower highs, lower lows in this controlled downtrend environment. And I've seen this number of times in the previous times where if you guys have been on my live at night before, you've heard me say where the market just continues to set lower highs, lower lows. That's basically what it feels like right now. So you definitely want to identify your resistance levels, your support levels, and play it off of each other, right? But of course, the other thing that I always brag about is be careful with your overnight positions. Keep them small in this kind of environment because these overnight swings have just been drastic. Other key thing to point out is we also do have Jerome Powell tomorrow. So he's going to be testifying. We'll see what he's going to be saying. If there's any more information that we're going to be getting on the rate hike, maybe he throws some kind of curveball in terms of anything related to the Ukraine Russia madness that's going on. So we'll keep ears out on that. But other than that, just stay fluid, guys. Keep it small. I think in this environment, preserving your capital is pretty much the biggest thing that you want right now. So don't try to go all in trying to make up a loss or whatever be the case. Just keep it small, keep it consistent, and just apply your stop losses as you always would. All right. But I will leave you guys with that sentiment. But other than that, I appreciate you guys joining in. I will see you guys on live tomorrow morning, and we will call it an evening. Appreciate that, Salt Life. I definitely appreciate that. All right. But definitely appreciate you guys joining in. Again, I'll see you guys on live tomorrow morning. Hopefully tomorrow is pretty much a banger. I would hope we get some good price action tomorrow. But it is what it is. What market volatility is likely going to continue to prevail, and we'll just be here to pretty much preserve our capital and just stay fluid within it. All right. But you guys have a great afternoon. Again, see you guys in the morning. Air Drake.